Another teacher I want to talk about who had a significant impact on my life was George Harnish. He was drama teacher for many years at both Auburn High School and East High School in Rockford. And he founded the Kappa program for the arts at Auburn. They taught, it was a specific program for theater students, for people who wanted to dance, for the arts, but just in general, the arts. I could be completely wrong about that, but it fostered the talents of many young people who would otherwise not have such an opportunity. So for that, he should be acknowledged. Just that alone. I first met him in, I think, 1996. I knew him from around school, and I remember him as a guy with not a lot of hair on his head, and there was an oxygen tank perpetually strapped to his back. And that was really all I knew about him. He substituted for the choir classes on a few occasions when Carol Johnson was unwell. I talked about her in another video. And that was really all I knew about him. But my first real association and direct interaction with him was in the spring, we'll say the spring semester of 1997, when he was producing The Fantastics. And I somehow got it in my head to go and audition for this. I knew nothing about it. We sang a couple songs from it in madrigal choir for a couple days, and we thought it might form part of our all-city choir program until it was announced that it was actually part of a musical that was going to be, there were going to be auditions for it. And I decided I needed to go be part of this. So I went and auditioned, and my first experience with auditioning like that was a funny memory. I went, there were several kids I didn't recognize, and gosh, there's a good memory here. There were so many kids I didn't recognize, and I thought about leaving when Laura, one of my classmates from Madrigal Choir, brightly came up to me, and she was managing the auditions. I think she was stage manager for that production. And she encouraged me. I was supposed to go talk to Harnish, and I found him watching the auditions in the chairs of the auditorium at East. And he had his chin rested on his arms like so, while he was leaning forward on the row in front of him, and just quietly watching, not taking any notes or anything. And I don't think that was his style. I timidly approached him because, I'm such a wimp, and asked to audition, and he expressed mild interest. He directed me back to Laura, and she gave me a paper to fill in, my stats, like my height, my weight, my hair color, my experience in singing, and any special talents I might have. Of course, I put down singing, because at that point I'd found my voice, and I was comfortable singing. And then the next talent, being a pain. I showed it to Laura. She laughed at that part, but suggested I get a new paper and not write down that dubious talent. Of course, I didn't do that. What I did was cross it out and then draw a smiley face next to it. My first emoji, I think. And I turned that in instead. And Harnish looked at the paper, and he chuckled slightly, but didn't really call attention to my dubious talent. And I auditioned. I sang Plant a Cabbage. that was that. Forgot about the audition. He let me into the Fantastics, and I had the role of Henry. That was my first role on the stage. Now, I admit I was a big problem in this production, because it was my first show and I was a child, and I behaved as such. And I wouldn't follow directions. I kept messing up the lines. I kept adding things to it when I was instructed not to do so, because it didn't fit the character or divert from the story or what have you. But I was determined to have fun in the part, and Harnish emphasized fun. He emphasized individuality, and as long as it was sensible. And for my additions to the part, they really weren't sensible. They were pretty damn stupid. And I don't know, I must have caused him a good deal of frustration, but he liked me enough, and I liked his personality, and we clicked. It was good, and it was a good association. The following year we had some more, my senior year, we had some interpersonal challenges. And he did teach me the worthwhile activity of stagecraft. I helped build the set for The Foreigner. It was a play that was produced in the autumn by his assistant, John Slager. And, of course, I continued my winning ways. By the way, I auditioned for The Foreigner, but I did not get a part. I wasn't sore about that. I worked on the stage and helped build that huge log cabin out of styrofoam blocks. That was a fun experience, and it was a good experience. It was, however, a slap in the face when I wasn't even named in the programs, and when Slager was calling people to the stage at the last performance, I was not among them. I always took exception to that. I always felt very slighted by that, like it was personal. I don't think it was an oversight, because he and I had a lot of problems too. And as a side note, he actually assaulted me during a rehearsal for The Mikado the following spring, when I was having a difficult moment backstage, and he actually seized my forearm and twisted it. Hurt me so badly without a lot. He did it with not a lot of provocation, and I really thought he was going to break my arm. And that's something you never ever do. A teacher should never physically handle a student like that. Not ever. When I reported it, I was asked, well, what did you do, Scott? As if whatever I did might have justified that kind of reaction. And it doesn't. Anyway. I was also in Harnish's drama class my senior year. Through some problems that I had with the class schedule that year, I had to rearrange my entire school day so I could have his freshman drama class in the third period. And something else. I'm not proud to admit this, but it is connected to him. My junior year, I failed driver's ed. I was one of the many students in that course in my junior year, sixth period, who failed the course. I failed the writing parts of it, and I wouldn't practice the driving part. I was too insecure and too immature for something as serious as operating a motor vehicle. Only 6 students from that class actually completed the course that year. Beg your pardon, that semester. And just the 6th period students. There were probably bigger numbers in other classes. Doesn't matter. I had it in my head to do it again my senior year, but because I'd already had the allowance for it, I was not going to be in it. Well, of course, at 17, I took that very personally. I was very emotional about it. I went crying to Harnish about it because he was the next teacher I saw. and actually his class was next. In my senior year schedule, his class was next, because driver's ed would have been second period, and drama was third. And he actually did me a favor by talking to the teachers for driver's ed, and allowed me to be part of it. Allowed me to retake the course, in which I did pass. I was more prepared and more mature for it that time. And he did me a big favor there, and he didn't have to. That was the kind of person he was. He was a kind man, a kind-hearted man, who looked out for the best in everybody, who looked out for the best in individuals, and looked out for his students, even if they couldn't give back. And at that age, in that year, I was not giving back. I was pushing back, fighting back more than anything, over imagined insults. And it came to a head when I was finally dropped from the cast of the Mikado. I was gutted by that. And the only reason he allowed me to stay in the chorus was because Carol Johnson got involved and said that if I have to be out of the production, she's not going to finish it either. And that was something I heard directly from her, so I definitely believe her. And that was a good thing, because I needed to be part of that. The Mikado was very important to me my senior year, and I didn't get to keep my role, but I did get a different role, the role of go-to, and which I played for all 4 performances, tiny role, and it got cut a lot. But it was cut from what it was intended to be. It's not actually an official part in the script, because it was too much distraction. But it was something, and that hurt me a great deal. But I learned from the lesson. The following year, Harnish provided costuming and props for my first stage production in 1999. That was the performance of The Princess's Lament at Midway Village. It was a play that I wrote, and it had some songs. I just needed to dress it, and he provided that from Auburn High School's repository. That was good for me, and I kept some of the same things for the sapphire necklace the following year. And there was some on and off throughout the years in communication, because I was out of high school. He was still teaching. I'd see him occasionally, or I'd talk to him occasionally. But he helped me out in my production of Mirette in 2011, when I needed to find a tenor, and I had to go to Auburn High School and spend a full day there to talk to all of the available tenor-voiced students to find someone to play the part. He came to a few of my shows, and he offered his help with the production of HMS Pinafore in 2014. In fact, it was a big kind of help, because he could see that I needed it, and I was headed in that direction, but I couldn't do it alone. And I asked his help for stage direction of the production. And that made a big difference. I think he had retired by that point. He had retired from teaching and was now doing freelance things. He came and did stage direction for HMS Pinafore, gave people a bunch of directions over a number of rehearsals, none of which anybody would remember, but that was the point. They weren't supposed to remember it. They would remember bits of things and then build on that. That was his intention, and that was the goal. I think that worked fairly well. Some of the cast were a little mystified by this, because there was so much going on, and sometimes he would give simple directions. But I think sometimes they felt overwhelmed at how much that was going on, and that it wasn't being emphasized whether they did it or not. The idea was for him to provide these things, and the cast would remember some of them, and they'd do that and build from there and make it their own. That's the kind of teacher he was. Later, he was the MC for my opera company's 10th anniversary in 2016. He did all the speeches between songs and scenes, so I wouldn't have to do it all night, because I spent enough of my shows just yapping away, and there were things backstage that needed attention, and sometimes I was on stage too. I would be vocally exhausted before the night was half over. So I asked him to do it, and he did a good job for us, and it was a good association because he'd been with us for Pinafore, and he was in the audience for at least 2 other shows. I know he came to Mirette, and I think he might have come to the Edward German recital. I don't really remember. And of course there was Pinafore. Later, toward the end of his life, he came to the last performance, the revival of Linderella's List in 2019. And when I saw him after curtain, he had tears in his eyes. He was proud of me. He was immensely proud of me because I had finally arrived. And if it hadn't been for him, I would not have stayed in theater. I probably would not have gotten to theater. As I found out later when I auditioned for Mike Webb at Starlight, I was out of my sphere. I had it really good with Harnish. With Mike Webb, not so much. And by the way, Harnish didn't have the most flattering things to say about Webb because they attended school together. And there was definitely a dark underside, which is another video and another story, and actually something I didn't get to be part of, so I have no business speaking on it, other than that. But Harnish was an excellent teacher. Like I said, he encouraged individuality. He recognized the individual for their individual gifts. He was willing to work with people on their level, and that made a significant impact on me because prior to him, only Carol Johnson had told me that my individuality mattered. And they were both in the same environment at the same time, so that made a difference. That's probably what carried me through high school. I probably would not have finished if it had been my choice, if one of them had been missing from the equation. So I definitely owe him a lot. He's been a significant help to my life, and he made a significant impact on my life. So if you were lucky enough to have him for a teacher, whether it be for he taught drama primarily. I don't think he ever taught dance. But if you ever had him, or if you were part of the Kappa program at any point, comment down below and let us know your stories about George Harnish. He was a good man, and he deserves to be remembered long beyond the end of his life.